big question asked a lot is mental toughness built into our DNA? Is it from childhood? Is it from our upbringing, our parents? Or is it from later on in life coaching and training? So with kind of what you've seen through that experience, where do you typically land on that question now?
Yeah, I'm gonna give you the typical psychologist response.
What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Mountain Tough Podcast. I am Dustin Diefenderfer, host and CEO, and I'm so glad that you are here. We love seeing you dive back into these episodes every week, and it is our goal to bring you an inspiring guest every single time that helps you build that mental toughness, that mental fitness, that mental health, changing that mindset so that you can stay dangerous and live always ready. If you are brand new to the show, if this is your first time, I do want to make sure that you know that as a listener to this show, you do get 6 weeks free on the Mountain Tough app. That's 6 weeks of training on Mountain Tough Plus. That's going to be all of our programming, full gym, no gym, minimal gear, heavy pack, and our mindset, nutrition, and spiritual training. All you need to do to access that code for your 6 weeks is go to mountaintough.com, click Start Free Trial, then enter the code MOUNTAINPOD, MTNPOD, all one word. Shifting gears now to today's guest. On the show today, we have a special guest from the special operations community. We have Jeremy Noble. Jeremy has a PhD in psychology, and he has been working with special operations, including the Ranger Regiment, for years. So after getting his degree, he was active duty for 10 years. While he was in the Army, he did work with special operations in personal selection, leader development, organizational intervention, team building, program improvement. So this is the guy that is helping special operations get better mentally. It's a really, really fascinating conversation. So please stand by for our episode with Jeremy Noble. I wanted to start a little bit just with your background and how you wound up doing what you're doing now. Where did that career path really start for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because I sort of fell into it, if that makes sense. You know, they say you're always like one decision away from a completely different life, and I think I've had a series of decisions that led me down this path. So I got my bachelor's in psychology, so I was going to the University of Southern Miss, and going into my junior year, I had like a 2.4 GPA. Like I was not a very good student, and I was talking with my advisor, and we both sort of agreed, I've got to figure something out, or else I'm going to be delivering pizzas or something. You know, like that. You can't do much with a bachelor's in psychology.
Yeah.
And so I busted my behind, got my GPA up enough to get into grad school, and when I got into grad school, that was when I started pursuing my doctorate in counseling psychology. And I really enjoyed that. And I really, really enjoy understanding why people do what they do. That sort of led me down the road of psychology. And I was going to go into academia. I wanted to be a professor. I like research. And an Air Force recruiter came in and presented with us and told us what Air Force psychology is all about. And I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know military psychology was a thing. And long story short, I actually ended up going the Army route because someone else told me about Army psychology, and they told me about what's called operational psychology, which is what I do now. And operational psychology is essentially organizational psychology plus sports psychology plus clinical psychology. So it's kind of everything merged together.
Okay.
And it's really only used within the special operations community. And so everybody that comes to a special operations unit has to go through some kind of selection process. And so I, as the psychologist for some of these units, like I come in and I do the psychological assessments on the individuals that are coming in the door, and then present that information to the hiring authority so they can make a well-informed decision about these folks. So yeah,
Dang.
so I got into the Army, was fortunate to do a residency in operational psychology, and this is where those like fortunate events kind of aligned. So when I was doing my residency, I had a faculty member there who was like one of the first Ranger psychologists. And he pulled me aside one day and he was like, "Hey, what do you want to do when you grow up?" And I had no idea, and he's like, "I think you'd be a good Ranger psych." And I didn't know what that was. And next thing I know, I'm going through RASP, and oh man, like I'm shocked they selected me. I was like dead last in the class. But
That's a
but I was
beatdown.
fortunate. Yeah, but I was fortunate to get hired at Ranger Regiment, and then that's where my operational psychology career started. And that place, man, best job I've ever had,
Mm.
and probably the best job I'm ever gonna have. I've never worked in a place or been around a group, a population of people that were more invested in bettering themselves and better in the environment, better in their organization. And
Yeah,
there's just this unquenchable thirst to be better there, and it's intoxicating. I mean, you can't help but want to be a better person when you're around, all these individuals that sort of feel that way.
it's
And
unreal.
so yeah, so I was at Ranger Regiment for almost 6 years, and as their command psychologist, and from there I went to another unit in the National Capital Region for about a year and a half, and decided that I wanted to get out and go do other things. And so about 2 years ago, I got out of the Army, started my own consulting business, and so that's what I do now.
Hmm.
And then I still do government contract work for various units. Yeah, so that's pretty much it.
Still working with soldiers, still working with operators, and then a little bit of a mix in there as well.
Yeah, I'd say the majority of what I do currently is still with soldiers,
Hmm.
and operators. Yeah, I'm getting into the corporate world, and I'm doing a decent amount with the civilian population, but uh, it's hard to not be pulled to work with soldiers.
Yeah.
It's just such a special population.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We had the opportunity to go to 375 Ranger Regiment last year, and we were able to document a little bit of the knowledge sharing that we did down there. And their human performance department was able to teach us a lot. And then we were able to show them the Mountain Tough ethos that we were applying here in Bozeman, through our app globally for high elevation, rugged terrain, heavy pack, mountain fitness. And so it was a really cool week where we were able to share knowledge, share ideas, and I was completely blown away, like you were saying, how it's just like a leadership manufacturing facility, like nothing that I've ever seen for sure. I was only there a week, so I have just a small glimpse into it. But the caliber of people and how they are constantly pushing themselves to be better, to learn, it is intoxicating, and it is unreal how they're able to do that year after year after year. I noticed that even like the best ranger competition, I'm always really fascinated in, and I think the Rangers just won that for like the fifth year in a row. You see them winning like the best mortar, the best sniper across like USASOC. It's really amazing what that Ranger culture is and what it has become, and then the legacy of how long it's been doing that. And I think hearing from you will be really interesting related to that, because we talk about mental toughness on the show. We talk about mindset on the show, but I think there is some different conversations to be had there when it comes to the type of clients you're used to working with. And I know that we're all human, and we all can be dumpster fires at times, but the mental toughness that we saw in our visit to the regiment was really, really elite. So I'm curious kind of what you saw with your work there and the work that you're doing when it comes to, mindset and kind of that sports psychology behavior of what these guys are working through and how they're overcoming adversity. Was it something really, really unique, or was it closely related to like a general population?
Yeah, I would say it was unique. I have the fortune of seeing the personality profiles of most of the folks that come through there, and then I got to sift through all the data and look at the norms. And really, I mean, the Ranger personality is very, very different than the average person, as you might imagine.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's similar to operators, across the community. But when you think of personality, the 5-factor model is what the research has said is sort of the leading theory or model on what personality is. And so researchers from the last 100 years, they've taken everything that makes us and they've bended it into 5 different categories. And so the first one is called neuroticism, or emotional stability. So things like how much you worry, or how quick you are to get angry, or how self-conscious you are. The second one is extroversion. When people think extroversion, they think of like wanting to be around people and being outgoing, but there's also an element of like energy and drive and craving stimulation that falls in that category.
Okay.
Then you have openness to like new experiences and change. Then you have agreeableness, which is how caring and cooperative you are, and then you have conscientiousness, which is your work ethic. And Rangers, the 2 areas that are very different than the general population is neuroticism. So these guys are very cool, calm, and collected. Compared to the average person, they don't get worked up easily. They're pretty secure with themselves. They are extremely resilient, and some of that is like innate, like people that are driven to this type of lifestyle. They're just more resilient than most folks. I mean, these are guys that have chosen the most difficult route in the Army. Not
Yeah.
only did they volunteer to join the Army, but they chose the hardest path,
Yeah.
which I think says something by itself. And yeah, so I mean, they're extremely resilient, and so part of that is them, but also part of that is like through training as well. I mean, these guys are putting themselves through really, really difficult things, and like, when you go through hard stuff, you grow.
Yeah.
When you put yourself in hard situations, you get a little grittier. And gosh, man, I remember when I graduated from Ranger School, I remember after that, I didn't have a bad day for a long time. Like,
So true.
like I remember like being excited to get in my truck and drive home, from work, because I was in my own truck. I had AC, I had music, so I think there's like an element of being in the suck and like appreciating when you're not in the suck, and so I think that really shapes personality a bit. And so they're more emotionally stable. They're less neurotic than the average person. And then the other one that is very different is that conscientiousness. And so these guys are through the roof in self-discipline, achievement orientation. I mean, they are driven, and they're also extremely dutiful. Like they're going to do the right thing. And so those are the 2 that, as a population, those are the 2 areas that I see so different.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting is that when you look at the research on just predictors of job success, just across the board, those are 2 of the strongest predictors in personality of people that are going to be successful, which makes sense when you think about it. Like if somebody's super disciplined, they're going to get the job done.
Yeah.
And if somebody's super resilient, they're going to be able to take feedback. They're going to be able to take setbacks. And so,
work through anything.
yeah, which I can talk through the other ones too. I don't want to bulldoze the conversation though.
I've used a ton of Bluetooth speakers over the years, and they all have never quite had enough output for me to really have an awesome home gym workout on a Bluetooth speaker. but the Turtle Box is in a whole new ball game. They have leveled up this product, so the bass and the output you get out of a Turtle Box is quite amazing. It's funny how we started using them at the lab. We had an awesome sound system at our new lab here in Bozeman. We were using it so much, we actually blew our brand new system out. We went right to the Turtle Boxes. And so we paired two together in the lab. And that was a lot of output for the Mountain Tough team and all of our testing to have phenomenal sound in our gym for a great workout with great music. We know there's a ton of Mountain Toughers training in their basements, in their garages, and I know a lot of you are looking for great sound to play some music in the background to your MGDs. This is a great product for you to check out. Turtle Box is at a whole new level. The bass and the volume you can get out of that box. It's a sweet product. You guys can check them out at turtleboxaudio.com. Use promo code TOUGH for a free Turtlebox hat with the purchase of a Gen 2 speaker. The hat must be added to your cart before entering the promo code TOUGH, TOUGH. Well, that is great. I am excited to hear the other ones, but I'm curious with how much of that did they arrive at RASP with versus how much of that was formed in them after RASP? Did you have any indicators on what was going on there?
Yeah. So, we have RASP 1 and RASP 2. RASP 1 is the junior enlisted assessment and selection. So these are folks who are all the way from E1 all the way up to E5 who are coming in. Most of them are fresh, into the Army. Most of them are young. I think 21 is the average age. But I mean, some of them are coming in at 17, Then you have RASP 2, which is your officer and senior enlisted population. And these are individuals who are at least E6 and up. And they've got experience, and they're coming in and they're being assessed for leadership positions.
Okay.
And so I would answer the question based on those two different populations, because what we're talking about here is personality. Personality is pretty stable over somebody's life, but it's still being developed well into their mid to late 20s. Some people would argue into early 30s, but for the most part, those 18 to like 25-year-olds, they're still malleable.
Yeah.
And they're still like trying to figure out life. And so what's interesting is like, for a lot of them, they already have some of these traits and they come into the organization already kind of equipped and sort of ready to go. But a lot of them don't. Like a lot of them come in and they're pretty self-conscious. They're not very sure of themselves. And then they go through 8 weeks of RASP 1 and they experience things like, coal range where they're being like yanked out of their sleeping bags at 2 a.m. when it's 30 degrees, They're experiencing some really hard stuff.
Yeah.
And if they don't quit and if they make it through it, then all of a sudden that self-consciousness goes down a little bit. And then they go to Ranger school and then it goes down a little bit more, And so I think the organization and this lifestyle does create some of this.
Mm-hmm.
And then they've got, I mean, where else do you have like dedicated mentors too? I mean, they've got some incredible examples of these leaders and mentors that they watch, and they see how like responsible these folks are and how they're super dedicated to their fitness program and their diet. And so I think that conscientiousness and that emotional stability is being developed in these young guys. I think for the RASP 2 population, the older guys, for that, I mean, they've had similar experiences where they've sort of been shaped, but at that point, we want to see them already have those traits. And if they come in and they're 30 years old and they're like, in the below average in conscientiousness, then it's probably not going to work out. Like they're probably going to come in and they're going to be dropping balls because the op tempo is so fast. And so for those, I think it's more important that they already have it coming into the organization versus the younger guys. I think there's still time for them to develop.
That is really interesting because, the big question asked a lot is mental toughness built into our DNA? Is it from childhood? Is it from our upbringing, our parents? Or is it from later on in life coaching and training. So with kind of what you've seen through that experience, where do you typically land on that question now?
Yeah. I'm gonna give you the typical psychologist response, and it depends, or a
It
little bit of both,
depends.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I came out of school as like a pretty strong behaviorist. So in other words, like I'm a big believer that our experiences and learning through life has shaped a lot of who we are. Until I read the Minnesota Twin Studies. Have you heard of those? You familiar with that?
I'm not.
So this was, I think it started in the 80s, might have been the 90s, but they've been doing this for decades. So this research lab up in Minnesota, they found identical twins that were separated at birth and adopted out, and they didn't know each other existed, right? So they found like groups of these folks, so they have a pretty big sample size at this point. And so these are people with the same everything, right? The same genetic makeup.
Same
These are
parents.
identical, yep, but different. Yeah, right. Same parents, but like they're identical twins. Like they're like carbon copies of the same person, right?
Yeah.
But they're raised in completely different environments.
Hmm.
And so this research group got a hold of them and gave them every psychological measure under the sun to try to see, like, okay, is this like how much of who we are is innate and genetic, and how much of it is learned environment? And I don't remember the exact percentages, but the majority was genetic.
Wow.
The majority was like, the DNA you have, the genes you have are gonna dictate, who you are. And so, I mean, that's,
Even
like,
even on the
for,
mindset stuff.
so it was, I don't remember the exact percentages, but it wasn't all of it, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
there was still a big chunk that was explained by environment, but it was more than half was explained by, your genetic makeup.
Yeah.
And so, so I guess I share that because, there's a big portion of like just how you're made up. Like some people are just different. They're just wired different. And it's just how they were born.
Mm-hmm.
Other people, like I've had plenty of Rangers that they struggle with being more neurotic. Like they don't fit the profile that I'm talking about, but they are successful because they know this about themselves and they actively work
Managing.
towards mitigating some of this stuff. And so
Wow.
so that sort of changed my own mindset around like the makeup of folks and people's personalities. But with the caveat that there's still a big chunk that's learned and developed. It's just not
Mm-hmm.
as big as I thought it was.
That's crazy. That is really, really interesting that we're all working with probably the genetic makeup of ourselves, and we can work on that chunk to improve certain characteristics about ourselves. And then there's things that are wired in us that we have to learn how to manage and mitigate.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
And
Yep. Absolutely.
with what you're seeing with the special operations community, how they're wired, how they're built, how they're designed predominantly, is that does that cross over and closely align a lot of times with how most high performers are wired? Are they wired very similarly?
Mhm. Yeah, they are. Yeah, I mean, especially in the those two domains that I talked about. Um, Generally speaking, folks that perform really well, they're pretty good with adversity. So they're
Mm-hmm.
able to bounce back when bad things happen. And then that conscientiousness, I mean, they're thorough and cautious. They deliberate before they act, and they're not just shooting from the hip. They're not impulsive. They're fairly organized. They have like structures that they put in place to make sure that they're getting the job done and things are not falling through the cracks. Um, yeah, I mean, at least in my experience, I've seen that play out, not just with Rangers. Like this
Yeah.
is really across the board for high performers. You're going to see that sort of, if you look at the personality test, you're going to see that one domain really high and that other one low. That's pretty common across that group.
Yeah, I was wondering about that because I was curious with high performers and special operations, that mindset, that personality, those behaviors and characteristics, it can lead to so many positives with like the jobs they're doing and the work that they're getting done. But does that wiring and that personality type, even though there's a lot of good in it, does it also come with some negatives?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we'll start with the neuroticism being low. A lot of times when somebody doesn't experience anxiety or self-consciousness like the average person, they sort of assume everybody else is that way.
Mm.
And when everybody's not, and so there's a lot of times there's like a lack of empathy, where they'll have a subordinate or they'll have someone that reacts in a very emotional way, and they're just sort of like, man, why don't you just suck it up? Like, I don't understand, why you're reacting this way. So that's one way that I've seen it sort of affect in terms of like relationships,
I could see
that
that
it
one. Yeah.
can create problems.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I mean, conscientiousness being high, like there's some places where that's really, really adaptive. Like at work at a place like Ranger Regiment, it's very adaptive to be super structured and regimented. But like sometimes that can be seen as like rigidity and perfectionism and other places. And like some jobs, like, people may see you as the stuck up guy who can't sort of break away from the regiment.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I've seen this stuff play out negatively socially,
Yeah.
especially in cultures that are just not used to that sort of thing. At least that's where my mind goes first when you ask that question.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And is there unique ways that they handle well or struggle through trauma?
Yeah. So people will deal with trauma differently. And when you say trauma, I mean, are you referring to combat specific or childhood or what are you thinking?
Yeah, I was thinking starting with combat just because I assume that would be one reason for like quite a few people to see you in your career would be, coming to see you as a military psych. Would it be common for me to come see you because I'm trying to navigate through some trauma in my life?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And trauma can show up in a couple different ways.
Mountain Tough is the fitness app trusted by the dedicated. Mountain Tough ethos is backed by we've always wanted to be the best in the world at helping our customers become more mentally tough. So inside the Mountain Tough app, you're not only going to find all of our physical training programs, but you're going to find additional training as well so that you can stay sharp physically, mentally, spiritually, and nutritionally. The Mountain Tough app also allows you to train no matter where you are, anytime, anywhere. Additionally, the Mountain Tough app is going to have programs from beginners all the way up to elite athletes. And all of our programming is structured in a way that you can start with no gear at body weight, and you can go all the way up to programming that is full gear. So you can do that in a robust home gym or your local gym. There's no excuse for you not to start today. With Mountain Tough, you can conquer your goals with the ideal program for your lifestyle and schedule. Train with equipment or just your body weight on your phone, tablet, TV, or web browser. Most importantly, Mountain Tough will help you train your mindset so you are always ready for anything life throws your way. Mountain Tough is offering the Mountain Tough Podcast listeners an incredible offer. 6 weeks free on the Mountain Tough app. All you need to do is use the code MTNPOD to redeem your 6 weeks of training. That'll be a 14-day free trial plus a whole additional 4 weeks of training. Just go to mountaintough.com and enter code MTNPOD for your 6 weeks free on the best-in-class physical and mental training app.
PTSD, what I've told people, essentially post-traumatic stress disorder is really your body doing what it's designed to do, and our bodies are wired for survival. And so what PTSD is we've had exposure to a traumatic event that our brains perceived as life-threatening. Then when we have like reminders of that event, we try our best to avoid it. And the when it becomes a disorder is when that avoidance kind of behavior interferes with your functioning, whether it's through like your ability to go to work or your ability to connect with your loved ones or whatever. So there's two different, in my opinion, there's two subsets of PTSD. There's the one where it's pretty straightforward. You had a life-threatening event, and I'll give you an example. Let's say this is one I use pretty common. So let's say someone is driving to work. They stop at a gas station to fill up their vehicle, and then they fill a gun to the back of their head, and someone's holding them up to rob them. That's a traumatic, life-threatening event.
Yeah.
Let's say that person, the next time they go to get gas, they think, yeah, I don't think I'm going to do that. I think I'm just going to wait. I got enough in the tank. I can get it after work. And then they pass it again. They pass it again. And before you know it, like they're not getting they can't put gas in their vehicle, and then they can't go to work. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a version of PTSD.
Avoidance.
Yeah, avoidance. That one is like the easiest to treat, and that's insensitive for me to say because it's easy for me as the psychologist because I know exactly what to do. The way you treat that is through exposure. And so we would build a hierarchy of avoided behaviors and start with the easiest one and work our way up. And the beauty of human behavior is that we adapt to everything. And so like if you experience anxiety when you go to a gas station, then if you avoid that gas station, then you're not having to feel that anxiety. And so it's training your body to not go there. And so you're going to feel more anxiety the next time you try to go. But all the sights and smells and sounds and everything associated with a gas station is going to trigger these alarms in your brain saying that your life's in danger. You got to go. You got to get out of there. And so what we do is we expose you to those things like the smell of gasoline. Not that I'd be having people huff gas, but like,
but smelling it.
but like the smell, right? Like you smell it enough and to where that anxiety starts to go down because your body can only hold anxiety for so long. And so you're having to retrain your body to be okay with these things.
Mm-hmm.
That's the easy part of treating PTSD. The other piece is when you do something that you feel like conflicts with your own values. So maybe you participated in something that you feel like was not, was immoral. So the term is like moral injury that you hear people talk about.
Yeah.
That's the harder one to treat. And so there is treatment for that, by the way, that's effective. But it takes a little more, there's a little more depth that goes into that. And so I break those up because the first one, that Ranger personality, that's easy. That's easy because the guys are like, they're ready to go. They're ready to work on this.
Work on it. Let's get this done.
Yep. Let's figure this out. Let's do it. And I always tell them at the beginning of like, you're not going to want to do this, but if you wanted to do this, you wouldn't need to do it because by the definition of this is you want to avoid. But these guys are so gritty and like they understand and they're smart too. I left that out. Like Ranger IQ is significantly above average compared to the general population. And that's the same for other operators too. Most of my experiences with Ranger Regiment, so that's why I'm using them.
Yeah.
So they're smart. They get it. They get the mechanism and they're ready to go. Like they're courageous. They're like, let's do it. And so that route is the easier one. The second one is harder in my opinion because Rangers also have this strong sense of duty and responsibility. The morals are stronger there. The convictions are stronger. And so when there's a moral injury, I think it's a little more catastrophic.
Yeah.
I think they feel it more. And so that's the piece that's like they're going to beat themselves up a little bit more. It's going to affect them more in terms of their mood. And so I don't know if that answers kind of what you're asking, Dustin, but that's where my mind went when you asked about that.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And I could see how the second one, the moral one, would be brutal, especially on, someone that holds their reputation in a really high regard, their character in a really high regard. But you're saying that there's still a treatment for that is a psychological treatment, not medical, correct?
Yeah. So it's a type of therapy. It's a manualized therapy. So one of the treatments is called cognitive processing therapy. And really what you do is you go through and we talk through the event. So what that event was, and then I mean there's some exposure to it where you're recalling the event and lots of details. So because mentally people want to not think about it, like that's
Mm,
part of avoidance. And so part of that is to not let yourself not think about it. And so you recall it, and then we sort of break it down and we analyze your interpretation of it. Because most of the time the interpretation is not rational. The interpretation is I should have done more. I could have prevented this. And when you actually take a step back from the emotions and you actually look at it, a lot of times the person couldn't have done anything more, and so
hmm.
it varies from situation to situation, but um, it's a little more complex because it's gonna take some deep digging and trying to figure out like what did that situation mean to you and how did that change your worldview.
Yeah, that makes sense. I had a really interesting, in depth podcast yesterday with Micah Fink, and Micah Fink was a Navy SEAL, and then he started a program out here in Montana called Heroes and Horses. And his Heroes and Horses program is a 41-day program where veterans go into the backcountry, and for 41 days straight, they're working with their horse. A lot of times they're they're working with a Mustang that they're kind of breaking along this journey. The Mustang, they get the Mustang and a pack mule. The pack mule is there to carry all their gear for the 41-day journey, and then so they know that that's their lifeline. The horse and the mule is the lifeline, and if they screw that up, they're going to have a really rough backcountry experience. But then they're doing a lot with like an anti-inflammation diet. They're doing no meds at all are allowed on the trip. No alcohol at all is allowed on the trip, and there's a lot of cold therapy, and so they're cold plunging in uh, rivers, lakes, and streams. And then there's a lot of hard work, and they're doing all that in the wilderness of Montana and Wyoming. And he has a strong bias towards not identifying people with PTSD, because that can that can become their identity, and they can use that as almost like an arrow in their brain or an arrow in their soul. If they're given that diagnosis can then become an identity and have a lot of negative ramifications related to that. So he was arguing from his perspective that he would prefer that diagnosis not be given, and he would prefer that through other means we help people discover that the answers that they are looking for already kind of reside within them. What are your kind of thoughts on that, with how damaging or not damaging just the diagnosis alone can be?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the benefits of a diagnosis are really to communicate what's happening, whether it's to the soldier and kind of explain to them, here's what's going on, and there's this researched diagnostic manual here that says these are the symptoms that you're experiencing. And then to communicate from provider to provider. So it's more of like if we refer someone to someone else, they understand like what kind of treatment the person needs based off of the symptoms. However, I tend to agree with your previous guest
Hmm.
because I've seen examples where people have a diagnosis, whether it's PTSD, whether it's TBI, whether it's operator syndrome, they have this diagnosis, and all of a sudden it becomes part of their identity and it becomes fixed. It's this thing that is part of them and it's never going to change. And like, PTSD is something that can no longer be PTSD. Like there's treatment, there's ways that people can treat it to where it's no longer interfering with their functioning, and therefore it's no longer technically a disorder.
Yeah.
That so I saw a stat a while back that the number one predictor of concussion recovery is appropriate education about concussion recovery. Because people, when they have a concussion, they think, oh my God, I'm going to have problems forever. And when the research doesn't support that. And when they're made aware, like, this is not part of me. This is not, I'm not broken. I can heal. The brain is a resilient thing. Then they get better quicker.
Yeah.
And so I totally agree with that. I think that, like, I've seen examples too where it has become fixed. Like I've seen like biker patches with PTSD on it, where it's almost like a badge of honor. It's almost like a way that people can show the world that, hey, I've done some tough stuff and I've been there. I think there's still a way to have that identity and like to demonstrate that you've done some hard things, or you're a veteran or whatever, without like identifying with the disorder and thus making the disorder part of you. So, yeah, I agree. I think it would be a more helpful approach to really go after it in a different way versus sort of having that label and sort of attaching that label to the service member.
Yeah, the psychology of that is fascinating, because from the human performance standpoint, the prehab rehab doctor on the Mountain Tough staff always gave me an interesting perspective related to spine, and our spines, get pretty banged up over time with running around with heavy packs in the mountains and working out hard in the gym. And there was times when I was struggling with some inflamed disc stuff and herniated disc stuff. And he said, I know your back is hurting, and, we are going to work through that. But he's like, I would recommend you don't get an MRI. And I said, well, why would you not want me to get an MRI? And he said, because they're going to see like 7 or 8 other spots of inflammation in that imaging, and they're going to show them to you. And as soon as you see those 7 or 8 other spots, they're all going to start hurting when they haven't hurt at all in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, the psychology of that is so fascinating.
Totally.
Once you get that label, it can have some negative consequences.
Yeah. Yeah. I had our physical therapist, Ranger Regiment, tell me the same thing.
Hey guys, I did want to interrupt for a quick minute right here and let you know about some supplements I've been taking. I did shy away from supplements for a long time. I was always cautious about what they were made out of, where they were from, and who the team was behind the brands. But over the last couple of years, I've got to meet the team at Mountain Ops from top to bottom, and they are an amazing group of humans. I've got to know the CEO, Trevor Farnes, really well, and he is a mission-focused individual that cares about humans living a better quality of life so that they can have that abundant life. So over the last couple of years, he has helped me add some things that have changed the game for me. One of those things that I've added is creatine from Mountain Ops. It helps me maintain some muscle mass, but also it's a big player in cognitive function, one of the most researched supplements out there. Also, I've added reds, greens, and protein, all from Mountain Ops. What I found as a busy professional, always on the run, I do eat a whole foods diet for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but on the go, it's hard to get enough vegetables, fruits, and protein. So I've added that from Mountain Ops, and it has significantly changed the game. I can feel it in my performance. I haven't got sick for a long time, and I can certainly feel it in my mental clarity as well. The last thing I've added is the Mountain Tough Hydrate product for the backcountry, for hunting season. When I'm in the hills, I do run short on those electrolytes. We even have a Mountain Tough flavor, the Mountain Tough Lemon Lime Hydrate, and that is a game changer for hydration in the backcountry. So I keep it really simple. That is all I've added to my protocol, and it has certainly helped me, and I certainly believe in the team and the culture behind Mountain Ops. They have started an initiative that's been around for a while called Conquer Hunger. Conquer Hunger is giving meals to hungry kids that aren't getting enough food, and they've given out over 6 million meals plus to kids through their Conquer Hunger initiative. So every order that happens at Mountain Ops, a percentage of that order goes to Conquer Hunger. So certainly an incredible company, an incredible culture. As a listener to the show, you do get an exclusive offer to Mountain Ops, so make sure you check that out. The offer is incredible as a first-time purchase at mountainops.com. So build your order if it's your first time. They are offering you a 20% exclusive discount. All you need to do is enter the promo code Mountain Tough, all one word, all caps, for 20% off your first order at mountainops.com.
I ruptured a disc when I was there in my back, and I still have problems every, few months. It'll pop out. But he said the same thing to me. He was like, I really would rather you not get an MRI. He said, because you're going to find other things that look wrong, and it may be correlated, with your back, but it could be something completely different. But now it's in your head that this thing is wrong, and now you're going to start to hurt more.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I mean, the brain is a really powerful thing. I mean, like this is kind of a random anecdote. I was thinking about this the other day, but like, you familiar with phantom limb syndrome?
Yeah. That one's crazy too.
Right? Like people have an itch, like they're missing a limb and they have an itch, and it's not there, right? And there's still nerve endings and stuff, but I remember, and I've never actually tested this out in person, but I remember learning in a psychology course in grad school that someone found that if you held up a mirror and you had the person like see it in the mirror and scratch the other leg, because it's flipped in the mirror, that it actually resolved the itch.
Wow.
And so like you think about how powerful the brain is to do something like that. So yeah, absolutely. There's a lot to be said for like your expectations,
Mm-hmm.
and how those expectations can affect your wellness.
For sure. Have you seen, doing the work that you've been able to do, and now, thinking about society, thinking about like the Mountain Tough community, I think about this question a lot when it comes to like raising my two daughters. They're 12 and 10 with that kind of culture, with that kind of world, with the people that are going through there, operating at such an elite level. When it comes to the question of, how do we pass on how do we pass down mental toughness? How do we raise mentally tough kids, or how do we help people in our community have a different mindset and be more mentally tough? How do you think about that now with the work that you've done?
Yeah. I think it's important to do hard things. I know it's like a simple answer, but I think doing hard stuff builds character in more ways than one. Going back to what I said earlier, when I got out of Ranger school, like the sky was bluer, food tastes better, like things were good in comparison. But I think you learn a lot about yourself too when you go through hard situations.
Yeah.
There's like a model for self-awareness called the Johari window. You ever seen that? You familiar with that?
No.
So if you picture like a quad chart, on the top you've got things you know about yourself, things you don't know about yourself, and then on the side you've got things other people know about you and things that other people don't know about you. And so you have your one window of things that you know about yourself, other people know about yourself. This is kind of like what's out in the open. Like
Mm-hmm.
people, like I'm introverted, and like my friends and family know that I'm introverted, so that's not a hidden kind of thing. There are things about you that that other people don't know. Like I used to be pretty socially anxious when I was younger, like afraid of embarrassment and stuff. And there's a little bit of that still there. Like it's kind of been beaten out of me over the years, but
Yeah.
there's still some there. But like I do a lot of presentations and things like that. And so people don't know that about me, but
Mm-hmm.
it's still there, right? Um, but that last column or that last box, that things that you don't know about yourself and other people don't know about yourself, that part, like people always ask me, like, how do you find that out?
Oh
Because you can
man.
figure out the rest of them,
Yeah.
but it's doing hard stuff. It's like I learned a lot about myself in Ranger School. I learned a lot about myself in SEER School. Like I learned in Ranger School that I don't do well without sleep. Like
It,
I'm kind of a jerk without sleep, and
mm-hmm.
and I just don't cognitively operate well. Um, but among other things that I learned about myself. So
It's the
I
only
mean,
way to
I
learn
think
those things though.
right,
Yeah.
right, because when else, like, how else are you going to figure this stuff out if you just kind of live a life of comfort?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I really think it's just encouraging, your kids to do things that are difficult. It's
Mm-hmm.
that plus like having those conversations of why it's important. Because it's one thing to like make your kid do something hard and then say, nope, you're going to do this. Then you're building resentment. You're kind of having the opposite effect because now you're making them self-conscious. You're making them not want to do this stuff. But if you explain to them why this is important, and if
Yeah.
you're always in their corner and you're
Mm-hmm.
that support role, and then they do this thing and they're proud of themselves and they're coming to you, excited, wanting to share that pride with you. I mean, you're building character, you're getting them excited, and then also, I mean, just by example, I mean, leading by example is such a huge thing.
Yeah.
John F. Kennedy said a rising tide raises all boats, right?
Yeah.
So like if you're that figurehead, that leader in your family and you're putting yourself out there, you're doing this stuff, I mean, that's gonna speak volumes. I had a former Ranger, actually met this guy in Afghanistan. He was a contractor, and I love this dude, just an incredible individual. And he hit me up the other day, and he was telling me about his kid. Like he's got his kid in wrestling, or maybe it was jujitsu. But he was telling me like the kid is just he's scared to death to lose. He was asking me for advice, and I don't remember what all I told him, but one of the pieces was showing him that it's okay to put yourself out there and to fail. Like
Mm-hmm.
failure is how you learn. And he said, "Oh, that's perfect." He said, "I'm going to take him to my jujitsu class tonight, and I'm going to show him how all these other guys, beat the crap out of me
Yeah.
because he's a little older." And he's like, "But I'm also going to show him that I'm going to make them work for it."
Yeah.
And and so I just think that's a great example of like I'm gonna show him through example like it's okay to lose. You're still winning to an extent because you're learning and you're growing. And so yeah, so I think uh, doing difficult things and supporting them through the difficult things, and then also leading by example. I think those would be my two go-tos for that.
Yeah, I agree. Those are two big ones, two big cornerstone ones, and it is amazing for kids anyways. It has been amazing for me that at first you don't know that it's working or feel like it's working. And so like for my wife and I, just doing really hard things around our kids since they've been born, just with our lifestyle and our profession, they've seen a lot of hard workouts. They've seen a lot of training. They've been around during a lot of training. They've been around a lot of people doing hard things, and then they've seen a lot of hard stuff on the mountain and been around a lot of hard stuff on the mountain. And for a while, you don't really know that it's working until all of a sudden that you do and you see it, and it takes a little time, but once you see it, you're just so excited because you're like,
Yeah,
wow, like
yeah,
they are like sponges and they have been soaking this up for the last 4 or 5 years, even though, maybe we thought they didn't. And that's always a really special moment when you see that kind of click. And that click is not from something maybe you were talking about a lot, but you were just exposing them to and letting them be around for it.
Yeah, yeah. And I can't imagine a more fulfilling moment than to see your kid display a value that you hold dear and then
Mm-hmm.
do it on their own. You know, you didn't have to tell them, like they're doing it on their own, and you see that this is intrinsic for them. Like they're doing this because this is now part of them.
For
I think
sure.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing. I did want to shift gears for a different question and unpack a little bit of this with you before we depart. But what I see fairly common with Mountain Tough, we have the opportunity to work with a lot of individuals from special operations through our training and through some stuff we do out here in Bozeman. And there seems to be a common thread that there is a lot of fear and there is a lot of intimidation for the special operations community when it does come time to get out, when it's time for them to get out and go retire or leave the military and start a new chapter of their life. And I always thought that it makes sense to me from a few perspectives, but at the same time, I always found that really, really fascinating. And the more that we've had the chance to engage with these individuals, the more I see it, and I see it over and over again. And it's there's some irony in it, because you're like, for some of the individuals you're talking to, they're not scared at all to jump out of a helicopter. They're not scared at all to jump out of an airplane at night. They're not scared at all to be shot at. But for them to start a business, or for them to walk into an unknown town and take an unknown job, is really, really quite a intimidating process to them. What do you think? What do you think is going on there, and what are some of the things that are really helping with that process?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a theory called self-determination theory, and there's a lot of components to it. But one of the pieces that has always stuck with me is that human beings have three basic psychological needs. They have the need to have autonomy, so they need the ability to make their own decisions. People don't like to be told what to do and have their freedom restricted. They need mastery or competence, so they need a goal to move towards. They need to get better in something, and then they need what they call relatedness, but it's just being a part of like a social group, like part of a tribe. And what's interesting with these operators, these military members, is there may not have been a whole lot of autonomy, especially the early years. But special operations is more autonomous than the rest of the army, so they
Mm,
have a lot of freedom there.
yeah,
But the other two, oh my God, you can't. There is no place that has more
mastery and
structure in terms
tribe.
of competence, right?
Yeah.
Mastery. Like from the rank structure to the schools that they have to go to. I mean, and you have a place like Ranger Regiment, like these guys, they are constantly training because they're going to the big show, which when we were in Afghanistan, like that was it. They're going to deploy, like every battalion was deployed every year, and so they're going to go and they're going to put their skills to the test.
Mm,
And so that mastery was just fed. And then the relatedness piece, I mean, that's your tribe. These are like-minded people that they're going through the same stuff. So there's shared hardship, but there's also like a lots of similarities with values. Like I said at the beginning of the episode, like these are people who, if you go 0630 at footprint, at any Ranger footprint, but I'm thinking Fort Benning, Georgia, you're going to
mm,
see a lot of guys getting after it hard,
yeah.
and they're all doing it together. And so like you have this shared mindset that where you have these like-minded people. And I've been fortunate to interview a lot of folks that come back to Ranger Regiment after they've gone out somewhere else. And I always ask, why do you want to come here? Like, why are you coming back? Why not go somewhere else? And it's always the people. There is no other place where people are this impressive and they're this ready to get after it. And there's this like, how do we get after yes, or how do we get to yes kind of mentality.
Hmm.
So you have like these operators that come from an environment that just fills those basic psychological needs to the max. And then because it's a, 20-year career or however long they've stayed in,
Yeah.
like one day overnight, those last two things are completely stripped from them, and they have to figure it out on their own. And if they go into a new job, like they've just spent 20 years building mastery in one job. Now they're going and starting over on a different one. And they're at the bottom of the totem pole now, in terms of
Hmm.
the hierarchy. And I think the bigger piece is they don't feel like they've got their tribe
The
anymore.
tribe would be hard to replace.
Yeah.
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 Really hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
What
Absolutely.
What are some things that are making that process go a little smoother?
Yeah, I think doing things like what you're talking about, like I love that 40 day horse and pack mule. I mean
Yeah.
that, oh my God, that sounds like that would be an amazing experience for so many reasons. You've
Hmm.
got that purpose, you're doing something hard, you're around like-minded people. I mean that, I think that's amazing. There are like Ranger Regiment has all these communities too, like Three Ranger Foundation. They've got like a mentorship program set up. Gallant Few is another one. Like they do these Ranger kind of events. Like Gallant Few, they every year they put on this they call it Spirit of Derby Week, where Rangers go hike up Pikes Peak in Colorado. I did it 2 years ago. Wasn't able to do it last year because of the schedule, but man, it was incredible,
That's
incredible being
awesome.
around these guys.
Yeah.
So I think like doing things like that, like deliberately going and being part of your tribe, I think is incredibly important. And I didn't mention this before, but Rangers tend to be a little more introverted, and I think operators do too, and they're more socially selective, and so it's easy to just keep to themselves.
Hmm.
It's hard to reach out and like go and do some of these events. And so, going back to what I said earlier with that negative feedback loop, when I use the PTSD example, at the gas station, like
Yeah.
if somebody's introverted and they don't want to go and do social activity and they decide not to go do it when the opportunity arises, well, they're training themselves further to be more isolated and not do it. And it's going to get
Mm.
harder the next time. So yeah, so I think being part of the tribe, or finding your tribe, finding ways to get involved, I think is huge. And then I think finding things that give you a goal, a way to establish mastery, whether it's getting into endurance sports, whether it's like doing some of these mountain events you're talking about,
Hmm.
whether it's pursuing some kind of degree. I mean, whatever your goal is, I think you're going to have to put some kind of structure down, and I think it needs to be difficult, and I think you need to take active steps towards it. And I think those are the two things that I would recommend, at least what I've seen. The guys that have transitioned the best, I've seen them like really get after those two things, and I think it's worked out well for them.
That's great. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, especially under that framework of looking at it from those three principles. That's really helpful. Well, Jeremy, I appreciate you, man. I appreciate you jumping on the show. This has been incredibly helpful, and I love the work that you're doing and have done. And it's really in align with Mountain Tough and what we believe and how we try to work with our customers and focus not just on their physical, but that mental and how that mental can be transformed by doing hard things is a big philosophy of ours. So I really appreciate you jumping on the show.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me, and I appreciate all you guys do. I think you do a lot for the veteran community. I think that's an understatement. So, you know, coming from a psychologist, thank you for taking care of this great population. But thanks for having me, and if I can do anything for you guys in the future, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Awesome. Thank you. What a great conversation with Jeremy Noble. Remember, every single episode on the Mountain Tough Show, we are looking for that golden nugget. What can we take away from this episode and apply to our lives right away so that practical approach to mental toughness is creating a life transformation, and we're using these practices immediately. The big golden nugget for me with Jeremy was when we got into that PTSD conversation, he did agree with our previous guest, Micah Fink, related to you have to be careful with attaching that PTSD diagnosis to you and accepting that as your identity. He agreed that that can be a mistake, that can be a major pitfall. Even though you might have some things to work for, you do not want that to become your identity. And that is just such a true statement for all of us, whether we were in the service or not. There's always things that come up in our life that create these labels, and these labels can change our whole mindset on life, our worldview, and the lens on how we see things. And oftentimes they can give us a victim-based identity, not a self-reliant identity. So be careful with those things. Be careful what labels you're allowing to be on your life and how that is impacting your mindset. That is a big, big one. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Like and subscribe to this channel. We do love seeing your comments on these videos, so please leave us a comment on YouTube or in the podcast store you are listening to right now. The comments mean the world to us, and the comments via the algorithm help these episodes get out to more people. Also, remember, you can watch and listen to the Mountain Tough Show in the Mountain Tough app. So as a subscriber to Mountain Tough Plus, all these episodes are available there, in addition to all our mental and physical training. Love you guys, and we'll see you on the next episode.